Well, it was exciting because it looks as if we had never been like we'd never been on a holiday. And it was just a holiday that my mum told us. But we had to go up to school, Hammer School. We were only allowed to take a change of clothing. And when we got to school, we went in the bus and it took us down to the White Rock. And we got on the boat and we docked at Weymouth.
Well, I don't know, in a way. I think everything was so sort of strange. You sort of did what you were told to do by the teacher, you know. And they said, well, you must do so and so. Well, we just did it. And like I said, there were a lot of very young children, because my aunt was headmistress of Vovert. And, you know, wasn't in those days, Vovert wasn't a very wealthy area. And some of the children, well, they only had a carrier bag with their clothes in. They didn't have a suitcase.
I was brought up in the children's home. So I left the children's home and I was at Vovert. And then we went with all the Vovert people down to the harbour. And never been on a boat. It was going to be an adventure as far as I was concerned, you know, taking me away from a children's home, going away.
We had to be down at Vovert School because we went with Vovert for a certain time, and we just had to wait there. But of course it was very late by the time we got on the boat, because the boat was going back and forwards to Dunkirk. So the sailors told my mother, and we took a long time to get to Weymouth, a long time.
We had to go back to school, and they told us at school that it was sending you back home to put one change of clothing in a bag, or if you had a case. That's all you could take. Let's say one change of clothing. We didn't have any travel cases. We hadn't been any further than Sark. So Mum went to town and came back with one. The following day, went back to school. When evening came, we were all lined up and walked down the avenue. I remember walking down the avenue and being on board the Batavia, a Dutch cattle ship, they said it was.
Well, the boat journey was, actually, we were all down in the bilges. It was like an old coal boat. So we were down in the bilges. And it wasn't very nice.
I remember going up on deck. We were just about to go through the shipping lanes. There were boats everywhere, you know, the cool hang.
But the actual journey was all right. There wasn't any German boats around or anything. We just went and we landed at Southampton.
We all got put into a theatre, and we just sort of, you know, all these children massed there. We weren't the only school. And like I say, the nurse looked to see if we had any lice in our hair. Nothing else, which we all thought was quite funny.
It was nice that St John's Salvation Army was there, and we were taken to a big hall and given a cup of tea or a glass of milk and a sticky bun.
But when we got there were 3 or 4 lines of mattresses where we all had to keep down in one of them until we were told, you go there, you know.
Well, after this, we had had our cup of tea or milk and sticky bun. They took us to the station and we were on a train. And we were so excited, but we hadn't seen black cows or anything like that. And that's the first time I went on a train.
And the train took us straight up to Scotland. We didn't even have anything to eat. Just straight up to Scotland.
We hadn't had anything to eat or to drink. And we got on this train anyway, and it went off, and we were getting higher and higher in the train, the journey up north, and in the end the teacher said, well, when we got to the next station, that we've got to have something, and the children got to have a drink. So anyway, and sure enough, when we got to the next station, there were these big corned beef sandwiches. Funny how you remember some things. And a cup of strong tea. I wasn't used to drinking tea. I was used to drinking milk. But anyway, we did, and we eventually got to Glasgow.
We went to Glasgow, and I think we went to the main railway station. And then some of us was taken in buses to Camp Hill Church Hall, and some to Lancashire Church Hall. They were very nice, those people. Very nice.
Well, we were taken off, we actually got off the train, and we were put, I don't know really how quite, somehow my mother was with us, and somehow, I don't know how she did it, but she kept my two sisters and I together. And we were there, and we clung on to her like grim death, but also looking after little children who had never been anywhere. And we got put in buses, and each bus went to a different church hall, and we were in a church called St Ninian's, and we got this hall, and there were sort of camp beds each side, and you were just sat in a camp. And then they brought the food each day in great big urns, you know, and yeah, we were looked after.
The place that we stayed at, when there was the Dunkirk invasion, they took the kids from Glasgow into the billets where we were, and instead of you being in the bed, there were 3 or 4 of us in the bed. And talk about a flea pit. You woke up covered in bloody flea bites. And they used to have a competition to see how many fleas you could catch in a jam jar.
Well, the Churchills, the people were very nice, and they used to make sure we had plenty to do and that. And then about a week later, people started to come to there, and they started to choose who they wanted and that.
We gathered in a group, and they asked people to come and choose the child they want to take. I was 8 years old. I was only a bloody titch, and I was the last one in the queue. And they took me to a home, and that's another story. All they wanted was a bloody slave, literally. You know what talk about slaves today? Well, in those days, they had monkeys, they had parrots. What else did they have? Something. Anyway, I had to do the house cleaning. I had to take the dogs for a walk. I had to clean the parrots out, get my fingers nipped.
I was in Glasgow for 5 years. Bernie went up to, I forgot the name. Bernie went up, and I went to the east end of Glasgow, which was the last new town before Edinburgh. And there was an inn halfway through Edinburgh, a pub basically.
I was billeted several times, and I always ended back at the church hall. And then the lady that I stayed with in the end, she came, and she was the devil. It was terrible. We didn't have nothing. We never yet had pocket money. We had no spending money or anything. And when we went to school, she used to watch us go to school, and she used to watch us come out of school. And I used to have to go to church Sunday mornings, Sunday school, and evening church, and yet she never used to go to church. The woman downstairs used to take us because we were in flats. And, she was horrible. But it was one day they had barley soup. Oh, I can't look at barley now. And I didn't eat my soup for dinner. She put it for my tea. I couldn't eat it. Then she put it for my breakfast, and I couldn't do it. Then when I went to school, I was feeling hungry, and I saw this lunchbox. And I opened it, there was a sandwich, ham sandwich with that, and of course I ate it. But it was one of the other children's lunch. And I was taken to the headmaster, sit outside the door. And the prefect was a man, it was one of the boys. And he said, "You want an onion?" I said, "What for?" He said, "To rub your hands." He said, "You won't be so bad." I said, "No." I said, "It'll be all right." And the headmaster come out, with the strap and that. I thought, well, here goes. And he asked me why I'd done it, and I told him. He was horrified. And the French teacher came, and she took me into the staff room, and she gave me a couple of biscuits and a glass of milk. And then a few days later, the authorities come down to see the woman I was staying with and told her that if she did it again, we would be taken away. And I turned around to them, I says, "Well, can't you take me now?" They said, "We got nowhere to put you."
I got on well in Scotland, Bonnie Scotland, and I ended up in all of the regalia, the jacket coming home with the kilt and the socks and the tags and that, and the cap to go with it. And I goes into town from Dalgens Road, and I get to the bottom of the hill, walked across, in past the OGH, and from there on down there, all the women were looking at me. It was a bloody kilt they were looking at. We wore it like second hand, and it was, that's what we wore to school in Scotland. I never wore it again. I kept it for a long time, but I never wore it away. Gordon Tartan, yeah. It's green and white for Guernsey. Yeah, those were the days.
We felt it, was, when we were fortunate. My mother came with this, but I mean, they were, yes, it was a hard time, a very hard time, actually.
I don't know what it's like when you're a foreigner. We spoke like we do now. Of course, in Scotland, they speak Scots, yeah? And of course, don't you speak funny, eh? The trouble was, I was small, and they had a gang that would form a circle, and they would choose a boy, one a day, into the circle, and you had to fight.
But the people of the church were very, very good. And, and my mother used to alter a lot of clothes because some of the children didn't have any clothes, or if they did, they weren't, quite right. And people used to bring things in, but of course they didn't fit, and luckily my mother could do it.
In this house in Campsie Gardens, 45 Campsie Gardens, living under the stairs, we always had to sleep under the stairs because of the raids. And we were woken up about 3:15, and the people in the house told us that the war was over. And that was it. Well, we were collected I can't remember who it was. I think it was a chap called Stosbury, if I remember right. He was in charge of, he used to visit the homes every few months just to see how they were getting on. And we were told that we were going to be leaving and we had to be ready.
On board the boat, I think we got there late, don't know why. There was no seating, every seat was taken. I remember I was sat on the, they used to ring the ropes on the stern, but I was sat on one of those all night. Fortunately, it was a good crossing, it was cold, coldish, and it was interesting to see the coast.
Anyway, travelled all the way to Guernsey, and I landed on the White Rock, and I stood there, and I waited for somebody to come and collect me. Again, I was the last one stood there. So I went to the police station, and I told the police station I'd just arrived back from Scotland. Oh, you're not the first one, there's been others as well. And they found me a place in the Evacuees. And Mrs. Robley, and Mrs. Auger, she was a very religious lady. She expected me to go to church 3 times a Sunday.
Well, we didn't seem to belong, it was, all our friends was not coming back and that. And you were more or less on your own.
The funny thing from Bernie and I, it was only after I remember, the first thing they did was clasp us and hugged us, and then swapped over. And that had never happened in 5 years in Glasgow. And then Bernie they split us up, and Bernie was sent out foreign, shall we say, into about 30 miles from Glasgow. But he didn't have a good bullet, I did, so I was lucky the one, So they took us to see them twice, but he didn't look very happy, Bernie, he was always the one that got the short straw, shall we say. Yeah.
Well, when we come back to Guernsey, I just couldn't settle. And I went as a nanny, and then I went, that was in Hawking Basingstoke. And then I was there for about 2 years, and then I went up to London, and I was an auxiliary nurse up there. And then I cut my finger or something, and I had to leave. And then I went into a store, Ardeen and Hobbs, I think it was. And there I was, and then I had a letter from Mum telling me that I was, she wasn't very well and all that. And the woman I was renting room off of told me, she says, I think you should go back home. And I did.
Well, you for one thing, I know there were thousands of people like it, of children who were without their fathers because they were fighting, weren't they? And yes, so, you did. The days that you don't forget, really.